Hi everybody, welcome to the University of Chester Kitchen Lecture Series. My name is Ash Murphy, I'm a member of the School of Law and I research in international and environmental law. Welcome to my kitchen, which has been freshly prepared today, unlike my lockdown haircut, which does get in my eyes and causes a lot of annoyance. So if it annoys you as much as it does me, I really do apologise for that. So today I'm going to talk to you about COVID-19 and the environment. Before I do begin that, just in case you have any questions, please put them in the comments box to the right-hand side, and after the lecture I will address them and see if I can answer some of them adequately. So my objectives today are to understand that environmental law is broadly ineffective and has been since its very, very beginning. Second to that, I want to introduce that there are specific links to COVID-19 which might explain how we've got into this situation because of our treatment of the environment. This is weird in an online lecture. I can't see your faces, but hopefully that's clear, guys, okay? If not, use the comments box, ask any questions. So, beginning in 1972, this is really the foundations of international environmental law. This is when states came together and realized that we were destroying the planet. It kind of followed getting to the moon, looking down at the Earth from a different perspective and realizing, well, actually, there's only one planet here. There is no planet B. We are on this planet and we are destroying it. So we came together in Stockholm to negotiate a number of principles, a number of foundational ideas to protect the environment. And these were quite good in essence. However, within the Stockholm Declaration is Principle 21, which preserves the sovereignty of the nation state, which basically allows each country to exploit their own environments as they see fit, as long as it doesn't interfere with another state's environment, okay? Now, this has paved the way for economic development and development generally at the expense of the environment, without anyone being able to say, well, hang on a minute, you are actually destroying the environment, okay? State sovereignty preserved, okay, is preserved, sorry. And the long-term impact of this failing foundation of environmental law can be seen throughout all examples as recently as 2015 in the Paris Agreement. So let's just look at a couple of examples now, okay? The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It says parties should protect the climate system. In the same way your mum says, you should eat your broccoli. But I don't know if there's any consequences if you actually don't eat your broccoli. Same with climate law. In regard to the Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution Convention, parties shall endeavour to limit their pollution. In the same way, you shall endeavour to hoover the house before you go out the weekend. But as long as you try, it doesn't really matter if you don't succeed, right? It didn't in my house, at least. Anyway, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species says trade in specimens of these endangered species must be subject to particularly strict regulation. Now that language is actually quite firm, it's actually quite strong, it's different to the other two. But does that mean there's a difference in terms of effectiveness? So let's look at the environmental reality of these three areas. Climate change first. CO2 concentration now exceeds 400 parts per million consistently. That's not going to change in my lifetime, it's not going to change in your lifetime either. Emissions show no sign of deceleration. They're going one way, up. And alongside that, the global temperature is continuing to increase as well. Climate change is happening despite the fact we have climate law. If we look at air pollution, only 30% of states have adopted standards to reduce their sulfur pollution, something that is really harmful to human health. Only 1/3 of those states meet the minimum sulfur obligation of 50 parts per million. And in 2016, 416 sulfur hotspots were identified around the planet, with some producing more than 4,000 kilotons of sulfur per year. That's 4,000 kilotons that I'm breathing in, you're breathing in, and everyone out there is breathing in, and it's very harmful to our health. If we look at animal trade and abuse, we know that every year, between 140 and 170 pangolins are smuggled into China via known routes. In a 13-year period, 227 pangolins were seized. At the same time, 1,500 tigers were killed for illegal trade purposes. And at the end of that period, 3 tons of ivory had been seized, along with 36 rhino horns. So what we have here is a gap between law and reality. States and governments, time and again, prioritise the economy. They prioritise development, and this is reflected in how they draft environmental agreements. The nature and the environment always takes a second place to economy and development, and this really hinders the effectiveness of all environmental law. But it's actually easy to just blame governments and blame states and the negotiation processes. But we have to recognise there is an apathy and a disconnection in regard to the environment and humanity. We don't link what's going on in the environment to our own existence, to our own human lives. We certainly don't link our existence to the global environment, to everyone connected together. And that means when we go to the polling stations on voting day, we vote for governments which don't have strong environmental policies. We vote for governments which aren't going to prioritise protections for the environment. So we are complicit in allowing environmental degradation to take place, and we have been complicit since the very beginning. Now, what's going on at the moment, the COVID-19 pandemic, might actually be able to change and affect that apathy. And here's why. So let's look at COVID-19 and what I'm calling the animal connection. The virus is believed to have originated in bats, according to Stephen Turner, a microbiologist at the University of Monash in Australia. However, it's zoonotic, which means it goes from one animal to the next animal to the next animal. And obviously, it can jump to humans. Now, we know there is a tiger in New York Zoo which has contracted the virus. And you may have heard a few humans have also contracted it. Now, there is a working hypothesis that the virus reached humans through an intermediary host animal, i.e. it went from bats to something else to humans. This reflects the same pattern as the 2002 SARS virus, which went from bats to civets, which is a form of cat, to humans. So the question is, what is the host animal? It is suspected that pangolins may act as the host animal for COVID-19. We know that they're the most traded species, illegally traded, on the planet. Now, the virus may have its origins at the Wuhan seafood market in China. This is not necessarily clear, but it's suspected this is the case. Okay? Pangolins, they aren't listed on the itinerary of animals which were at that market. Nevertheless, we know pangolins are traded at these markets. There is pictographic evidence of pangolins in cages at these markets in the past. We know that there is a massive market in China for these animals, and it is likely that they were at the Wuhan market. My point being, if we can establish that pangolins were at the Wuhan seafood market, and this is the origin point where the virus managed to find its way to humanity, then we have a clear link between the origins of the virus and its transfer to humans. Not just that, we now know that if we were treating animals better, if we were enforcing the CITES treaty better, if we were closing down these known links of smuggling these animals into China better, we might not be in this position. But I'm not just singling out China. In this instance, China is relevant, but it's not just that country. It's all countries. We're all complicit in this problem again and again and again. We all treat animals appallingly. And if we don't all stop, then this is going to continue. But the origins of COVID-19 are only traced to animals. Its intensity and its ferocity, once it's reached humanity, can be linked to another environmental problem: air pollution. The WHO recommends that there should be no more than 20 micrograms of pollution per cubic meter of air. But in some parts of the world, there is 500 micrograms of pollution per cubic meter. That is absolutely massive. These pollutants are really harmful to human health. Sulfur dioxide, benzene, nitrogen oxide, all stuff you don't want to be breathing in, okay? Yet, 92% of the world is living in conditions where the air pollution is above the WHO guidelines. In 2012, 7 million people died prematurely as a consequence of air pollution. 3.5 million as a direct consequence of breathing in sulfur and coal particulate in the outside ambient air. Not only that, in 2010, we saw that the death rate linked to pollution worldwide had gone up by 4%. The more we pollute the planet, the more we pollute ourselves. And there's this myth that pollution is a developing world problem, that it's only developing countries that are polluting. That is not the case. And let's look at the UK to prove that point now. There are 11 areas in the UK categorised as having moderate levels of pollution. What does this word moderate mean? It's ambiguous, it's not clear. So when I pulled back the data, I found that these 11 areas all had more than 45 microparticles of pollution per cubic metre, with some having as high as 62. That's significantly above the 25 particles that WHO recommends. Okay. Not just that, the UK is in breach of the 2008 Ambient Air Quality Directive under EU law. The developed world are complicit in this problem as much as anyone else. Let's just take a little demonstration to understand air pollution. This is a bit Blue Peter, right? This is the type of air we should be breathing, pollutant free. This is the type of air that the WHO says is safe to breathe. Doesn't look too appetizing, even though it's safe. In these 11 areas around the UK, this is the quality of air that people are breathing in. And around the world, people are breathing in much worse than this. Now, I know you're thinking, that's blackcurrant, it looks tasty. But just imagine that it was diesel fumes. Just imagine it was sulfur, petrol, oil. You wouldn't drink this. So why do you accept breathing it in? Why do we accept pollution standards like that? This is something that we need to talk about really seriously, because you definitely wouldn't drink that. So why is breathing it acceptable? What's pollution got to do with COVID-19 though? Research from the USA suggests that an increase in air pollution of just 1 microparticle per cubic metre results in an 8% increase in COVID-19 death rate. A small increase in long-term exposure to high levels of pollution increases your chance of death if you contract COVID-19. That is really, really significant. And it's not just findings from the USA that support this. A study looking at Germany, France, Italy, and Spain found that higher concentration of nitrogen oxide in certain areas meant a higher COVID-19 mortality rate. And not just higher, 78% higher. So if you're living in an area like this, you have 78% less chance of dying from COVID-19 than if you're living in an area like this. The bottom line is, long-term exposure to ambient air pollution is causing COVID-19 to have an intense impact upon humanity. And this is something we really need to be talking about more seriously. Because in the UK, it's quite clear that where the mortality rate is highest, in London and the South East, even proportionately speaking, these are the two areas where the nitrogen oxide and sulfur dioxide concentration levels are also highest. Okay? So what am I concluding with today then? Just to sum up, environmental law has been inadequate since its beginning. States with electoral consent have continued to operate with apathy towards environmental harm and destruction. The origins of COVID-19 can be traced back to our abuse and our exploitation of animals and the lack of robust legal enforcement of the relevant international instruments. The intensity of COVID-19 appears to be exacerbated by our long-term exposure to air pollution. Environmental protection, human existence, they are not mutually exclusive ideas. We have to recognise that we are connected. Our existence depends on the environment, and the environment now depends on our existence. If we don't change how we live and protect the natural world, we will see COVID-19 examples become more and more frequent. Environmental laws must be made more robust. We must introduce legislation and treaties to tackle environmental harm. We have a chance. We can do this. But you and me, we need to talk about this. Everyone needs to talk about it. The mainstream media are not talking about this enough. They are not making these connections. And when we recover from the immediate effects of what's going on at the moment, it has to be in a way that recognises this connection. because we cannot go back to business as usual. And if we do, we will be walking down the same path towards the same destruction again and again. Thank you very much. Let's see if we've got any questions. Okay, I can't see any questions, guys. What I'll do is I'll just sit here for a minute and see if any come up. I don't know how long I'm supposed to sit and just stare at the camera, so I'll maybe just talk a bit aimlessly just to see. Andrea Beck says, poverty is a big problem in protecting animals from poor treatment and for tackling pollution problems. Yes, poverty is a massive problem, and this is perhaps why the developing world gets linked with pollution and animal protection problems. And we in the developed world perhaps need to recognize this fact a little bit more and recognize that our aid budgets and our support and capacity building in the developing world should be much, much greater than it actually is. We are all on the planet together. Simply saying we're doing our bit in our country isn't enough. We need to extend the hand of friendship to all states and all nations in order to start universally protecting the environment. Because as we know, what takes place in one part of the global environment means that the impact will be felt everywhere else. For instance, New Zealand is a very isolated country geographically, and yet it experiences the same climatic problems as everyone else because of what's being put into the atmosphere globally. So if we're all damaging the environment globally, perhaps we should all be protecting the environment globally. And that responsibility is, again, something we really need to be recognizing. Thanks for the positive comments, guys. I really appreciate that. Melanie Jane says, thank you. Katie Robinson says, interesting lecture. Thanks, Ash. Thank you, Katie. I appreciate your comment greatly. Any more questions, guys? Well, perhaps what I'll say is then, I do teach and lecture on the environmental law program at level 6, which is undergraduate, and level 7, which is postgraduate. My modules are designed in a very critical fashion, so I take the environmental laws and I really pull them apart and we look at how they're implemented effectively or ineffectively globally, hopefully exposing the students to all types of dialogue and narrative on environmental problems. We touch ozone protection and pollution, climate change, animal rights. We look at environmental justice as a theory. We look at a range of different implementation methods, compliance and enforcement problems. All of this is the type of thing you'll get exposed to. Today's lecture was very short and to the point, with headlines more than details than anything else. But this is a good example of what we sort of will be covering if you come and join us in September, which hopefully you will. These comments are very positive. How can you apply for this course? That's a very good question. I would probably go straight to chester.ac.uk and have a look at what legal programs are currently being offered. Obviously, I teach in the law school. We do have a geography department as well, which will handle similar issues, and there is going to be some crossover between the geography and the legal departments in the future. So hopefully you can have a little look and see what's available on there. If you do need more information, please do contact one of the information lines on the website. I'm sorry, I can't give you any more information than that right now. That is a really unexpected question. Right, okay guys, the questions coming in seem to be slowing down now, so I really appreciate you tuning in today and listening. I do hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully see some of you in September. See you guys.